So I guess this is a final technical video for our robot. Basically, the overall design is that, or the flow of the game pieces is, they enter here, they go through our intake, they're put into our lift, and then all three sections here are open, and so it allows us to basically just haul as many pieces of fuel that we can pick up as possible, which dumps them all into the hopper. And then once we have a full hopper, by the way, this is also the same level as the base of the human player feed, as well as the game side loader. So basically, we can just dump as many balls as we can into the top. Once that happens, well, don't push too on it. The door at the base opens, and these side pistons actuate and create a funnel and directly to the center. And then we feed balls just through the center to our shooter, in which we go ahead and we score as many game pieces as we possibly can.
Alright, so talking about specifics here on the intake, we tried to copy the Rob roller that was made popular in the last year's Vex game, Nothing But Net. Basically, we CNC routed 2 discs with several holes in them, threaded surgical tubing all the way through, and it works incredibly well from what we need it to do. Very quick. We power it over here with a 775 Pro with a 30:1 gear ratio, and it's just chained to that with a 1:1. We were having issues with it loading into the elevator, so we tried to eliminate the dead zone that's here with a belt. This is just a 1:1 on these pulleys here. There's no actual math done in creating the location for that. It's just there to help eliminate the dead zone. This is just surgical tubing that's zip tied on. So another thing we did to help get rid of the dead zone and actually lift the balls is we have a ramp here, so the ball will travel from the ground to the elevator through the rollers. So the intake, we have it popped down because we want it to collect as many balls as possible. So we start the match with it up, and we have a pneumatic down here at the bottom that comes inwards, and it drops it down. The robot stays within the short volume configuration. So the frame perimeter is the square Andy Mark chassis, the altered configuration with the open face. That's actually quite a bit shorter lengthwise than the short configuration for the volume. So the intake pops down over the bumpers and stays within the volume. We just activate that with a piston. When we pull it back, it's here, and when we push it in, we lift back up. Pretty much this just stays down for the entire match. We just have to have it up for the beginning of the match to stay legal for the starting configuration.
So this is our lift. Up here we've got our mini sim that goes through a versaplanetary adapter to hex shaft, where we have simple chain that runs the entirety of this lift. The entire bottom roller, just so you know, the entire bottom roller is entirely powered by the surgical tubing that we run for the lift. Moving on, as you'll see or have seen in the reveal video, we intake and it fills all 3 sections here with balls to increase our volume capacity, or our intake volume capacity. For our shooting configuration, we activate our funnel. Come over here. Activate our funnel, which are these side pieces that fold down and create a funnel to the guide rails to go to the shooter, and our door actuates open, and so from there we feed our balls up through the funnel to the shooter, and we run the shooter at full power. It's worth noting that when we're intaking, the shooter is running at 10%, which is why you might sometimes see a ball shoot out the top, and that's because we don't want it to jam up while we're intaking. The shooter itself is just a Vex Pro, a 775 Pro on a 3:1 reduction, and we're using the AndyMark stealth wheels. This robot can hold about 50 balls in the hopper, and that's not including balls we can catch in the intake as well. So
For our hopper, to get the balls to funnel nicely into the elevator, we have two ramped sections here, and we also have a ramped section right here on the underside of our shooter. This prevents stacked balls from jamming the robot. The robot's feeding into the elevator, and these help isolate the balls into the middle of the funnel instead of going off into one side or the other and causing a jam in the elevator. One of the things that if we were to have more times that I would want to change is starting to look at the chain here on the elevator. We, because of the lack of time, figure-eighted this chain so we could get this roller and this roller to spin in opposite directions. This is actually relatively unsafe just because we have lots of moving metal parts against other moving metal parts. If we were actually competing with this robot, this is an accident waiting to happen. If we had more time, I would have wanted to reroute the chain. So instead of figure-eighting it, just going and snaking it around so it would work properly.
one thing that I'd really like to change is we use the AndyMark stealth wheels for our shooter, and they worked really well at the get-go and slowly get worse because pieces of embedded plastic from the game objects. So for other teams, I would heavily recommend finding either it might be just the blue stealth, just something some other wheel that doesn't get the embedded plastic, because that's going to cause inconsistencies in the long run game.
On the intake, it would have been really nice if we had more time. I would have liked to have a better location for the motor here. I would have rather have put it down at the pivot point so that when it comes up, it's not risking slamming into the wall here. Every time we do it, it gets incredibly close. It only just doesn't, but it gets
We can try it again.
right there. It like barely just doesn't, but it is incredibly close. And again, accidents waiting to happen on this here. If I would have much rathered if we could put the motor down lower and powered it from back here if possible, and from the pivot point. Another thing is we didn't have time or the resources to properly find a correct size belt here or even measure this out. We have these stapled on. Again, accidents waiting to happen on a robot that's seeing a competition field.
Another thing that we'd really like to improve is adding a agitating system into our hopper. We have our hopper feeds a single ball through at a time, and that is because we needed to stop a jamming problem because we don't have an agitation system. So right now the funnel works really well, and we get quite a few shots off with a decent rate. But if you had either an agitator or another conveyor, then you could have a much faster firing rate, and that's definitely going to be important in the long run.
Okay.
Down at the intake for both the hopper and the dead zone, it would have been much better if we had the time to stretch elastic tubing onto these axles instead of wrapping it around and zip tying it. These just cause lots of inconsistencies and are a mess. Having it wrapped around is much cleaner and works much better.
Another thing that we'd really like to change is, we were in the works of making a passive gear, a gear holding system from the slider tote, and we still have the space to put it on our robot, but we never really perfected it due to more focus on the intaking/shooting aspect of the robot. So that's definitely going to be crucial to this game, and I feel like that would be the next step that we did with this robot, given more time.